Term 3. Term 3 saw me revert back to a teacher-centered model. This was for two key reasons. The first being time. It takes quite a bit of time to create these videos and these mastery models, so I thought I'm having to make sure my seniors are prepared for their their externals and their derived grade exams at the end of term 3, so I'm not going to have as much time to create really cool stuff for my junior classes. I also thought that if the results I was seeing were just as a result of my boys maturing and developing normally, I should still see an increase or their grades staying the same. So I decided to just revert back to my traditional teaching style, teach up the front on the board, and see how that affected their achievement. Here's what I found out. So, in term 3, as I've said before, with lots of things happening in the school and seniors getting ready for their externals, I reverted back to my traditional teaching method. And the primary reason for that was wanting to see if the boys were just naturally maturing, naturally developing, but more importantly to see if teaching method actually was making a difference on my class. So as you can see, got the old whiteboard pens out, hit the whiteboard pretty hard with the acid to bases topic in Living World. The boys finally used their books for once in the year, and but still try to do as many hands-on activities to keep that constant throughout all 3 units as possible. So here was the pre-data. So with the Living World, I used their exam data and their end of topic test in Cells and Living Things. So very mixed for my class from last year, but still quite interesting. And here's the feedback that I gathered about this. Interesting, a lot about interacting with the teacher, which I found quite interesting. I think that meant interacting with me in a safe way, because I'd ask for questions and it was sort of hands up and very structured. You could ask questions straight away when things were happening, so because I was teaching it, they could ask questions. So you can see the boys that were happy to give questions and ask questions, and the boys that maybe would sit back and just listen to what was being said. Some really cool feedback here about what they didn't like about being teacher-centered, particularly around missing lessons, not being able to re-watch it because you only had your notes to go off. So if you weren't good at taking notes, that made it difficult to revise. Weren't able to learn at your own speed. Some missed the one-on-one sessions. Maybe the lack of variety meant it was a bit boring. So, did it work? Well, here was their Living World exam and their portfolio, which was just a written piece of writing about an experiment we did in acids and bases. Pretty interesting results. This mimicking almost identical to their Living World exam marks from year 9, and going back to almost identical data to where they were at the start of the year, which is amazing to see. A bit more accessibility here with sort of, I guess, internal work or work that they have the ability to ask for help with teacher, allowed accessibility to maybe higher levels there. But in a test environment, almost a complete reverting back to their year 9 sort of grades that they'd be expected to get. Here was the portfolios of 2 other classes. So again, similar results to what my boys got. Again, these 2 classes being taught through a teacher-centered model. And again, those 2 classes with their exam results. Interestingly, this class seems to do pretty well. It was the last topic taught before the exam, so often higher accessibility, but again, this class showing very similar results to mine. So, interestingly, some key talking points that I sort of was thinking about as I went through analysing the results. But I guess my theory of going back to a teacher-centered model meant that if this wasn't due to my teaching, they should continue to mature and develop and show improvement. And actually I saw the complete opposite. I saw them revert back to that sort of their expected grades from year 9, which is quite interesting. So one of the things I asked is, if you could be a teacher, what way would you teach, having seen Mr. Lloyd teach? Some pretty cool ideas coming through here. This one I particularly like. It's some things I was doing with my other classes involved board games in my seniors. They seem to like HyperDocs, but making them a lot smaller would be, I think, better for the boys. So where to now? This is what I have gathered from my journey into flipped learning. That the most effective use of my face-to-face time with my students is that I should be facilitating every student to have an individualized learning that's in a context or theme with as many hands-on activities that can allow access or more opportunities to a deeper level of thinking, and a classroom that allows both individual and group tasks with a whole load of choice, but in particular that they're allowed to progress at their own pace and advance when they're ready. That's a pretty intense goal for 2019, but I think it's doable. I've been exploring this, I guess it's sort of understanding of why, to our students, games are so addictive, are so so powerful at motivating students to do nothing. You know, if you think about a video game, the only thing that it gets you is, just a sense of achievement. But you have ultimately done nothing to do that. It's, you've just clicked a few buttons in the right order. So could we implement that into our teaching? And I think the answer is yes. So this guy that's just flashed up on the screen, he wrote a book called The World Peace and Other Fourth Grade Achievements. And there's also a documentary on him on Netflix that I watched. And this was sort of my first hint at what gamification, or the power behind gamification, could be in my class. And he has some very profound ideas, and I encourage all of you to just go and watch maybe a few trailers on YouTube for his Netflix documentary, because it's really impressive. This is Yu-Kai Chou. He's written a book on the psychology behind why games are so motivating for young people, just everyone in general. And finally, a guy I've made contact with in Canada, Scott Hebert. He has fully gamified his entire science classroom into a medieval world, and he utilizes things that he's learned from Yu-Kai Chou's book, and fully incorporated all of those things into making a really engaging, motivating, and deeper level of learning going on in his classroom. It's really cool to see. So I've read all these books this year around gamification, and this is probably another video about what I'm planning to do and going to do next year. But now that flipped learning has allowed me to free up time where I don't need to dedicate that to delivering content, I can now start doing some really cool, exciting stuff in my classroom, which is really exciting. So if you've lasted this long, thank you very much for listening. I look forward to having a chat around my inquiry with you, and maybe even giving you a hand if you're thinking this is something you want to implement, or even challenge me on. I'd love to talk about it with you. So thank you very much. I'll see you in class.